Farmland for a New Generation New York for funding these workshops. And I would also like to thank Megan and Cody for giving their time to present tonight. And with that, I'll let them take it away.
Okay, I'll go first. Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Harris-Pero. I am one of two attorneys in a small firm in Saratoga. We are across from Maple Avenue Middle School. I started the firm wanting to help farmers and specifically help farmers plan. So we do, now we not only help farmers, we help anybody, but we focus on estate planning, elder law, which is like Medicaid applications and things like that, estate settlement, which is what happens when someone passes away, and then also business planning, business formations. And those often tie into estate planning and the overall topic of farmland succession. So I'm honored to speak with you guys tonight. I've done this presentation a few different times for CCE and Saratoga Plan. And my partner, Jess Patello, who's not with me tonight, is also very well versed in these subjects. So we welcome any questions during this presentation, but also if you have any questions and you want to speak to an attorney, you're welcome to call us or go on our website and schedule. There's a contact us link, schedule and talk to us about anything later on. I'll let Cody introduce himself.
Thanks, Megan. So my name's Cody LePage. I work with Charter Oak Financial. We're a local financial advisory firm in Saratoga Springs. So there's myself and my partner, Michael Altavilla, and we really focus on helping small business owners and then farms as well with financial advice or financial planning. So coming from the North Country, I know and work with quite a few dairies up that way and some other smaller farms as well. We really just help our clients organize their financial affairs, whether it's transitioning their farm or saving enough assets so that they can retire and pass the farm to the next generation or to an outside buyer. It's really just figuring out what our clients' goals are and helping develop a plan to make that happen. And then also working with people like Megan to make sure from a legal standpoint that nobody else can gain access to your farm, whether it's the state or other things, just making sure what our clients want to happen happens. We're also on Maple Ave, just up the road from Megan. So we are local. If you all ever have questions, you're more than welcome to call our office as well.
I think we should just mention, if you have questions during the presentation, we don't want anybody to hesitate if we can help you understand a slide or a concept at that time. So you can either unmute and interrupt us, or if you put your questions in the chat, I know Tori and Nicolina will look for them. Okay.
So, all right, so I'll handle this slide, but basically we just wanted to give you all a couple of statistics that really stick out to us, and that's that 90% of businesses are family owned. Only 30% make it to the second generation, and even fewer at 12% make it to the third generation. And a lot of it goes back to having a plan. 43% of businesses don't have a succession plan. So that's part of the reason why you don't see farms or family-owned businesses transition down from generation to generation. Obviously, the struggles of business is part of it, but having good planning can guide you and get your farm or your family to where they want to be. So that's really the main point of this slide.
Okay, this is a graphic I love. So this is our attempt at explaining succession planning graphically. So to us, succession planning is kind of the merger of all of these other things. So the circles of estate planning, long-term care planning, retirement and financial planning, management planning. And I think also within here too, planning for your land, like whether there should be a conservation easement, which can kind of overlap with some of these retirement and financial estate planning, those sorts of things. And then on the outside circle, we have all of these different types of advisors that you might be working with in this process. So we see clients come to us from different stages, sometimes coming to us from after working with another advisor, sometimes starting, with the estate planner or starting with Cody just to look at the financial picture. What's most successful is when the clients have some goals in mind of what they want to accomplish. I'll give an example. I'm working with some clients that they know which child, wants to take over the farm. And sometimes you don't know who's going to take over the farm, but in this one example, they came to me, they know who should take over the farm. They're getting, they have a rough idea of their finances. They have a rough idea of the child's finances. And we're talking about all of these issues, with me, estate planning, long-term care planning. How do we set things up so that we can transition things to this child, but we don't give things away too quickly and hurt ourselves for estate planning, or we don't hurt ourselves if we need Medicaid. And then there's where Cody will come in, on the retirement and financial planning piece of this. And then there's the management part of preparing that successor to take over things. And this client is doing really well at that. And unfortunately, I can't help with that piece. That's not my piece, but I know there's CCE and there's other places, other advisors that can help with that management piece. Cody, do you have anything to add on that?
No, I would say, this slide really kind of hones in on when you're doing estate planning, you really have a team of professionals working together. That's where it is a little bit more complex, if you will, than just if you're just starting off in business or growing and trying to get to the point of where you're even worrying about retirement or succession planning. But it's really not as cumbersome as it looks, as long as you have your professionals working together. That really alleviates a lot of stress from the client if they have everyone working together.
I would say one other thing too is these are circles, and kind of the planning is can be circular at times. It can take time. Sometimes clients start out with a very simple estate plan, for example, because they're just not sure about some of the other pieces yet. And we can change things later and try to adapt to what might change. But I think it's really important to get started, and hopefully you all see that and get a taste of that tonight. Okay, so why plan for succession? One big reason is to make your own decisions. If you don't do any planning for these things and you have an emergency on the farm or you lose someone, it can be really hard to recover when you don't have a bunch of contingency plans in your succession plan to protect yourself, your family, and your business. So again, if you don't make up a plan, you might end up hurting your business, yourself, your family. Retirement, long-term care, and elder care. We have some other slides where I'll go into this a little bit tonight to touch on it. Also tax planning, where we'll touch on this tonight, a little bit of income, estate, and gift tax. And then to plan for the future use of your land. So I also work with some clients who have conservation easements or are pursuing conservation easements. It all depends on your, some of this depends on your goals, and it kind of goes back to, if you know what your goals are, it can really help your advisors try to help you get there and build contingency plans. Okay, estate planning. So this is like a big phrase. What does it mean? So when people call, they usually call and say, I need a will, or I need to update my will. And a will is part of estate planning. But to me, estate planning it's legal planning, and it's for life emergencies and end of life. So a will is really for end of life. It's no good until you pass away. You can change it before. But there are other documents for life emergencies. And your estate is basically everything you legally own. So emergency life plan decisions for you when and if you cannot. So these are the 3 core documents. Sometimes the last 2 are combined. In our office, they're combined. But these are important documents, or directives, what we call them, for your life planning. So what that means is, so I've got my little tractor and my ambulance here. If you have an emergency, be it a car accident, a farm accident, something like that, if you are in the hospital and you do not have a power of attorney and you are not conscious and cannot sign a document, then nobody can access your bank accounts. So that can mean, your bills don't get paid on time. The hospital's getting edgy and worried and bothering your relatives. So a power of attorney can help avoid that problem, and also avoid anyone needing to take control over your property in the event of a really life-changing emergency. So with a power of attorney, you can name an agent to have access to your assets, your bank accounts, things like that, take care of things. You also, if you have a business entity, and we'll talk about that later, want to make sure that you have enough people able to access your business accounts. Healthcare proxy and living will. So healthcare proxy is where you name agents to make healthcare decisions for you in the event that you can't. So if you're at the hospital, you're unconscious, you can't make a decision, these are the people who would make those decisions for you. And then the living will part, which is really confusing because they make it sound like a will, is your directions to your agents about what you would want to have happen in an emergency situation. Okay, end of life. If you don't have a will, what is your plan? The state has a plan for you if you don't have a will. And Cody and I saw this happen recently with a client who came to us after his wife passed away. So he thought he had a will, couldn't locate the will. So after diligent searching, the status is no will. So we have to go with the state's plan. So the state's plan is that this man received the first 50,000 of assets in his wife's name, and then 1/2 of the remaining estate, his wife's remaining assets in her name, because the rest went to their children. Most of my clients, I would say about 90% of my clients, want everything to the spouse initially and then give money to the children. So the state's plan is not the plan that most of you probably would want. So this is a good reason to have a will.
So some of the benefits of estate planning include the following, which coordinating your business and estate planning documents to work together. really does a variety of things. It keeps the business's money from being tied up in court. So your heirs or successors will have the ability to make payroll, purchase feed. Maybe it's the growing season, you need to purchase fertilizer, or really just give those people access to continue to run the business is one of the primary reasons. Provide asset protection. So estate planning will help in the sense that it can protect the farm from outside creditors to some degree, from a lawsuit, from Medicaid if there is a long-term care event and say the parents are still owners of the farm, that you can help protect the Medicaid from coming after their interests and affecting the second generation. The other part that it can protect from an asset standpoint is also divorce to a second generation as well, depending on what the family dynamic is. But it helps outline the specific plans for heirs, whether they're on family or off family. That's one of the biggest, not obstacles, but uniqueness to succession planning for farms, is that oftentimes there is an heir that has worked on the farm, like maybe a child for say 15 or 20 years. And then sometimes the parents have a couple other children. They really had nothing to do with the farm. So equalizing the estate in a sense doesn't necessarily mean that they want their kids to have equal amounts of money, but they want them to have something. And there can be issues with that if you don't have the proper documents, such as a trust or a will. So that's where it helps smooth that area of planning out as well. And then there's also some tax consequences if the succession plan isn't done properly. The most common one is a loss of step up in basis. And it occurs when one generation transfers the farm or a portion of the farm or an asset to either their kids or a relative that's looking to purchase the farm, and which is actually on the next slide. So I'll let Megan explain the step up in basis, but it's one of the few ways you can get money to the next generation tax-free.
I apologize for the wordiness of this slide. So I will try to explain this to you. And then hopefully when you get the video, if you need to pause it to read more, you can do that. But step up in basis, this was actually something that was shortly on the chopping block last year in terms of proposed bills and changes that the federal government wanted to make to estate tax. And it's something that I know New York Farm Bureau and others lobbied hard against. And so step up, the change to get rid of step up in basis is not in the bill. There were no huge estate tax changes last year, but it still remains to be seen how our government's going to pay for the things it needs to pay for. So it should be an interesting few years with changes in law. But anyway, step up in basis is basically a gift you can give to the next generation by leaving your property in your will or your trust instead of giving it outright to your child. So in this example, we have Ed. He received the family farm through his father's will. The value of the farm at the time of father's death is $800,000. Because he received that farm through his dad's will, notice that was a gift at death, then he receives a tax basis of $800,000 of basis for that farm. So if he then sells the family farm a few years later for $1 million, he has a capital gain of $200,000 only. If instead compare if his father, so Ed's father received a tax basis of, or has a tax basis of 150, or he did before he passed away. And while he was living, he gave Ed the farm as a gift. when you give a gift to someone during your life, you transfer your basis. So you give your basis over, that's Ed's tax basis would then be 150,000. So if Ed had a tax basis of 150,000, he sells the property in the future for $1 million. He has 850,000 in capital gains. That's not the tax he would need to pay, but he would need to pay capital gains tax on that 850. Now, this example doesn't include, exclusions for primary residence or anything like that. But the point is, it can be valuable from a tax perspective and a good gift for the next generation to pass assets in a will or a trust rather than change things over to your children's names during life.
So we just wanted to cover what some of your assets may include. So you have the farm assets, which would include animals, crops, machinery. Key people is another one we like to include. I mean, oftentimes, depending on the size of the farm, there are employees or people that work with you that really are an asset to the farm. And if you lose them or something happened to you and they didn't stay with the farm, it would just have a detrimental impact to the way the operations run. The other part is obviously the land. So you'd have the land itself, which can provide income or financial resource through the sale of the purchase of development rights or an easement. Then you have personal assets, which include the home, your bank accounts, retirement accounts. The personal assets of a primary residence on a farm, that just depends on whether your home is actually owned under the farm or if it's separate. But when you're doing estate planning, all three are usually closely related. So you have to kind of do your planning with the farm and personal planning at the same time. So that's really just the main point of the slide, I think, here is to get people thinking it's not just the farm or your personal assets. It's really, you have to look at everything as a whole picture when you're doing estate or retirement planning. So one potential threat that you can have to your estate plan, and this doesn't affect a lot of people, the majority of people are affected more by a potential long-term care event, but nonetheless, some people are affected by estate tax. And a lot of people hear of estate tax when they pass away. They're not really sure how it works or where it comes into play. So in the state of New York, if you're married, the numbers are basically double for both. But in the state of New York, if your farm and your savings and insurance and even life insurance counts in this, total over 6.1 million, you could have a New York State estate tax issue. And then for federal, it's basically a little over 12 million per person. But I'll let Megan explain the main differences between the two and some of the ways you can help avoid that.
Yeah, so these numbers look pretty big, but I think it's important to remember that your estate includes everything that you own in your individual name, or if you own something jointly, half of what you own is part of your estate. So if you have a lot of land and it's valuable land, that can be one thing included here. Also, life insurance is also included as part of your estate, and a lot of people don't think about that. These numbers may go down. There were a lot of threats for them to go down. The federal number is supposed to go down to pretty much match New York around 2026. There's a sunset of the law. Basically, there was a law that doubled the federal to make it this high, And if that doesn't get extended, then it'll go back down and match near New York in a few years here. One thing that I get a lot of questions about is, what is that gifting amount and how much can I give to someone? And that's the annual gift exclusion. It used to be, last year the number was 15,000, now it's 16,000. That you could give everyone you know $16,000, and it's, if you have a lot of money and you need to get rid of it to lower these thresholds for New York and federal, it's a way that you can reduce what is in your estate, you know, by giving lifetime gifts. And the $16,000 lifetime gifts, that amount spent giving that in 1 year doesn't eat away at these exemptions on the screen, because those exemptions are lifetime amounts, but it's kind of tricky because you don't know when you're going to pass away, and these lifetime amounts change.
Oh, well then, you just keep it plugged in all the time.
Okay.
Well,
Just checking if we had a question. Then another important thing here, I've got my little cautionary triangle. Gifts for Medicaid are completely different. And one of the upcoming slide, I'm going to give you an overview of Medicaid, which we've mentioned many times already. But gifting for Medicaid, or gifting, can cause a penalty for Medicaid. And just because there's this rule that you can give 16,000 away each year, that is for estate and gift taxes. That's a rule related to that, not related to Medicaid. So if you are looking to plan to receive Medicaid, you don't want to give away 16,000 a year and think that you're fine, because they're completely different rules. So here is a little bit of overview on Medicaid, now that we've mentioned it several times. So as Cody said, most of our clients do not have estate tax problems. The ones that do, we have special trusts and ways to try to balance out assets to try to lessen the blow of estate taxes. But the clients that have potential long-term care needs, those clients we talk to about Medicaid. So currently, if you, well, I should say about 40% of us are going to need a nursing home someday. Very few people I've met want to go into a nursing home, but if there is a situation where there's not enough care at home, or someone needs too much care, that's what happens with 40% of the population, is they need a nursing home at some point. So as you can see on the screen, the cost of care is very expensive. So we call it long-term care. You have home care, which is really hard to get in our areas. Downstate in the city, home care is more successful, you know, more people willing to work in home care. Assisted living and nursing home. So Medicaid, there are different types of Medicaid. When Obama was president, we heard, and even after, heard a lot about Obamacare and Medicaid there. That is a different kind of Medicaid from the kind on the screen here. This is Medicaid for long-term care. And there is Medicaid for home care, and there's Medicaid for nursing home care. In our area, even if you are eligible for home care within your home through Medicaid, it is very hard to find anybody to provide that care. So we plan and think about the worst case scenario, which would be nursing home care. Actually, I should say that nursing home cost there, the 12 to 15,000, that's per month. That's a per month thing. So your jaws are probably dropping. So in order to pay, if somebody on the farm needed nursing home care, 12 to 15,000 a month, how do you pay for that? you privately pay, or you have long-term care insurance, which Cody can talk to you about and quote you on, or you get Medicaid to help assist you with paying. So Medicaid is for low income, low assets. They call the assets resources here. And there's all sorts of complicated rules that I can't give you in just a few minutes, but in general, the applicant, the person who needs, I'm gonna go back. The person who needs the care, the applicant, can have 16,800 in their name. So just think of that as like in their bank account. And they can also have a house, and you can have your farm, you know, your, well, if your house is on your farm and that's all one deed or contiguous, you can still qualify for Medicaid. If that property, that real estate is in your, if you qualify for Medicaid while that property has your name on it, or your name on it with your spouse, then as soon as you receive Medicaid, the state can, a lien starts to try to recover what you're receiving from the state. And it doesn't affect you, it doesn't affect your spouse, but it does affect the next generation receiving the property. So the other numbers here, the spouse and community, this is an example here under resources where you have an applicant, the person who is in the nursing home, and the spouse and community is your spouse living at home. The spouse and community can have a little bit more money. They don't want to impoverish spouses in the community and make a spouse have to try to go to the government for money to live. Income. If you're in a nursing home, you, the applicant, can keep $50 of your income. The rest of it all goes to pay for your care. And then Medicaid covers the difference if you qualify. The spouse in the community can keep that $3,435 in income. And there is this 5-year look back period. So that's another question I get a lot. What's the 5-year look back period is if I file a Medicaid application for someone, the county Department of Social Services will need to look, and you need to verify and provide information with the application. They need to look at 5 years of your bank statements, and they look through bank statements. They also ask on the application, did you give anything away during the past 5 years? And anything you did give away will be added together, and there's a calculation of a penalty period. And what that means is, even if you gave things away during the 5 years, it can hurt you and mean that you might not have Medicaid right away to pay for you, and you might not have the money in your bank account anymore if you gave it away. So it's a lot to cover in a little slide, but I think the point is just, if this seems like it could be a threat to you, it's a good thing to think about in your planning, and just make sure that nobody's elder care and elder years are going to jeopardize the farm, and just give everyone peace of mind that that's taken care of.
All right. So I didn't come up with this acronym. It's actually another advisor did, so I can't take the credit for it. But there's basically 3 different ways that you can gift or transfer assets. 2 of them Megan will cover, but it's basically through a contract, through ownership, or through your will or a trust. And I think the next slide goes into detail. Yeah. So a contract is really what I refer to as titling. So if you have a retirement account through work or through the farm, you list your beneficiaries. So that's what a contract means. It's some type of investment where you get to name a beneficiary, and that's how that asset transfers to the next next generation or whomever your heirs are.
Okay. Are you
I
done?
was gonna let you cover ownership.
Okay. Okay, so ownership, so you can own something, you can own a bank account, for example. You can jointly own a bank account, and then say Cody and I own a bank account together. Those are usually always with some survivorship. Those bank accounts are with survivorship, unless it's for a convenience situation. Then if Cody and I own a bank account together, if I pass away, that account is Cody's. So that's one way to easily transfer that money. That's not always the easiest solution, is not always the right solution for every family, though, I would say. Like, because another just quick tangent, if Cody, for example, had special needs, like had or had an emergency where he had special needs and he needed some sort of government assistance, then that jointly owned account might hurt him. If he's on benefits, it could kick him off. Deed and same with a transfer on death, which is under contract. I could own an account and I could put on the account I wanted to transfer at death to Cody, but that may not be the best thing for Cody, depending on his life circumstances now or at the time when he would receive the money. So there's a lot of contingency planning with this planning. But deed or title, so ownership too, you can give a gift by changing a deed. You know, a deed is a change in title. Again, with the step up in basis caveat earlier, transferring something outright to someone, like if I just give my property to Cody and put his name on the deed, might not be the right way to go. And then there's the will. So probate is required probate is the proving of a will, and it's a court proceeding, all about the proving of a will. And the property, the estate that goes through the will, is anything that was individually owned. So if I have a bank account just in my name, I don't have Cody's, I don't have a transfer on death designation on it, then that property is going to need to be probated. So again, assets without beneficiaries, real estate, my individually owned real estate, or if I own something as tenants in common, if I own that property not with survivorship. So I could own a piece of property with my brothers and sisters all as tenants in common, and that would be the case. I might be intentional because I want my share to go to my kid. I don't want my share to go to my brothers and sisters. My share in that tenants in common property would be probate property when I pass away. Bank accounts, stock certificates, you can, these things, if they're individually owned, would be probated and would go through your will. All right. Or things could pass through a trust. So most people call and they ask about a will, but a trust is not a complete will replacement. If you have a trust, you should always have a will also. But a trust is a way to have a contract that controls where things are going, but potentially doesn't have the court's involvement. And I say potentially because you can always have a dispute with a trust and then you could have court involvement. So trusts are good tools for farmers because they can speed things up for when somebody passes away. And they can also deal with some problems or some control of assets during life too, just to make things easier. So there are tons of different kinds of trusts, but the main sort of types are revocable and irrevocable. So you can see revocable is flexible. I like to call it your alter ego. It's just like you with a cape or a different suit. You can change it. You can change a revocable trust really easily, but it doesn't provide any kind of asset protection. It just helps you avoid probate, kind of helps everything transition quicker to the next generation when you pass away, but it doesn't protect anything. It's your alter ego. An irrevocable trust cannot be easily changed. It provides asset protection and it's more complicated. We use irrevocable trusts a lot to try to protect assets. It could be for estate planning purposes or for long-term care purposes. So Medicaid for farmers. So farmers who think that they might need Medicaid someday should talk to an attorney who's knowledgeable about elder law and consider using a trust as part of their plan. You should make sure that the trust has a lot of, your advisor should make sure the trust has a lot of powers to help with selling or donating development rights, considering possible uses of land, how assets are titled, and to address these issues of, will the business continue if you can't work? Well, that's something to talk about with your advisor. One thing I want to say about irrevocable trusts and Medicaid and farmers and easements is if you are thinking that you need Medicaid and you are thinking about a conservation easement, make sure you mention both things to your attorney, because it kind of adds another layer of thinking through things for your planning. Okay. So protecting assets. So I mentioned asset protection. It's a fancy word, but in this slide is really in the context of planning for Medicaid. So it kind of sounds funny, perfectly legal, and something people do to try to plan ahead of time to protect assets from a Medicaid lien, to make sure that their children usually are not having to deal with a Medicaid lien. So sometimes people just give things to children and grandchildren. This is not recommended. It's risky, hard to get the gift back if you give something away and then you need it again. There are such things as life estate deeds out there. That's where I could give my property to Cody and I can say, but I want to retain my life use to it. So Cody, it's yours when I pass away, and there's a deed that says that, but I'm going to live there for the rest of my life. Those deeds can create a lot of issues though, because what if I stop paying my property taxes? What if I don't want to maintain the property? Is that Cody's job? Is it my job? There's a lot of things that are not spelled out in a life estate deed. Cody, do you have anything to add to that? Because I know you have personal experiences.
No, yeah, I would say that the life estate deed, a lot of times you see them used because they're cheaper to set up than a trust. That's the primary reason that you see people do them. The problem with them though is, like in Megan's example, if say you give the property to your kids and then you're still living there, if your children cause a car accident, got in a lawsuit, or maybe they get a divorce, then your property is now in the hands of somebody who never intended it to go to. So there's not really much legal protection or rights to the property to you if you're using a life estate deed to transition it to someone else. And you also lose a step up in cost basis with that method. So it's not tax advantaged either.
Okay. Irrevocable trust planning, I mentioned a little bit on the last slide. I do have a like a handout if anyone's interested. You can you can email me after, or I can send it out through Tori and Nicolina to give you more information in case you're interested in more about the trust. Crisis planning. So crisis planning is last minute planning for people to get on Medicaid. And it's something, so there are things that we can do to try to preserve assets, even if we don't have 5 years. And usually we can, depending on the assets, we can try to preserve about half of someone's assets. But we can only do this if we have a good power of attorney in place with the right kinds of powers in it. So it is really important to plan when people have capacity, meaning they can have the conversation with the attorney and there's no question about what they want, and they understand what they're doing.
So we're a little short on time, so I'm gonna go through this slide relatively quick, but the business succession steps, it's really a process. So it starts with the fact pattern, which that's just a term for really getting to know what your goals are. Once you have an idea on what you're looking to do, the next step is meeting with an advisor and letting them know what you're trying to do. And then we go to the business structures, which helps us get an idea on the types of planning that you've done so far. And then once we can see where you're at and what you're looking to do, we can come up with options that are available to you to transfer to the next generation or to whomever you want the farm to go to. And then after that, it comes to how are you going to get paid to be able to retire or do some of your other goals. So we have to look at where the funding solutions or money would come from for you, you all to be able to accomplish your goals. And then lastly, it's just implementing the plan that we've developed along the way and monitoring the plan to make sure, because usually it's going to happen over multiple years. Estate planning or succession planning doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. So you have to stay on top of it and keep your plan up to date. This just goes into the family dynamics. It can get fairly complicated with succession planning. Like you can see here, this slide shows you may have a key employee, an off family farm heir, maybe just one child that's a regular employee on the farm. But without the estate plan, it's a little tricky to outline how everything's going to transition. And to be honest, if there's family feuding, it may not transition the way you want it to, even with a will, for example, if you don't have other legal documents like a trust to ensure that happens.
Yeah, a few things not on this slide, but that Cody and I have dealt with too is divorce, or somebody moves away. So things are fluid. I think it goes back to that circular graphic. Things are fluid and change, and you're going to need different advisors at different times. So business entities. I won't read the slide, but these are a whole bunch of different types of entities. Sole proprietorship is in red because not really considered an entity, well, legally speaking. So business entity is basically a business structure that has been legally formed. You filed something with the state and you exist as a business. And I think most people now are going the way of LLCs because they're most flexible and easy to set up and easy to maintain. Others are corporation or partnership, but mainly you see LLCs now. And S corporation is kind of unique because there is no formation of an S corporation in New York. You form an LLC or a corporation and you elect to be an S corporation, but you have to meet IRS requirements. So your documents, in case you get audited, need to provide certain criteria in your operating agreement or your bylaws. Those are different words for these different entities to meet those requirements. But the majority of our farm clients are in LLCs. I see all the time people trying to form, well, some of them do form their own LLCs. We do a lot of LLC cleanup. There are a lot of requirements. Kind of the first way to form is pretty easy for most people, but then sometimes it requires a lot of cleanup later. I'll just leave it at that. So farm businesses can have 2 LLCs. So you can have a land holding LLC to own your land, an operating LLC to hold assets of the farm business. Why are we doing any of this? It's to limit your liability and separate your personal assets from your farm assets. Depending on the size of farm, sometimes, as Cody mentioned earlier, like sometimes your house is on your farm, you know, and actually uniquely, you can have your house on the farm and still treat it as a primary residence. You can still get a star exemption if you're a farmer. If you stop becoming a farmer, if you're no longer a farmer and your LLC owns your residence, you're no longer eligible for star. So there are a lot of unique things to farmers and some unique things for rules out there for farmers having LLCs. Are we saying that you need both of these LLCs? No. You should talk to an attorney and consider what is right for you, because depending on the type of farm, you may or may not need these 2 LLCs. So we've put, do you need this? Maybe. And this is my baby graphic because I consider an LLC to be like your new baby. You got your own EIN, it's a new baby. Okay.
So emergency life planning or business planning, it's really what Megan brought up in the sense that we want to help our clients plan for whatever possibility there is. So if you think about it, when you own a business, there's really only 4 ways you're going to get out of it. You could either pass away before you can retire, you become disabled, maybe you lose part of it through a divorce or bankruptcy or some type of credit loss that way, or departure, which is referring to retirement. So regardless of what 4 things happen, there needs to be some type of plan so that there's revenue to come in. So if you do the proper planning, whether it's death, disability, or you retire, usually you'll have structures in place where you can generate income or have money readily accessible to make sure either the farm keeps running or you could retire, for example, without having a cash flow constraint on the farm. A lot of farms during bad years have a hard enough time cash flowing as it is. So the last thing you want to do is be a couple years into retirement and the farm doesn't have enough money to continue to buy you out, for example. So you just have to have planning in place to try to avoid that.
This is where forming your LLC yourself and not having documents can hurt you too, because so there are legal documents that can help you with these things, and then Cody can help you with insurance for these things. Having those things in place is good.
So how do you retire? Again, there's usually only a few ways. You can sell to an outside farm or an outside buyer, sell to a family member, or transfer it to a family member. Sometimes it's a key employee. Other times, unfortunately, the farm has to basically stop operating and sell off land or other assets over time for the owners to retire. And then you could have outside retirement accounts that you've saved, like IRAs. Those also would allow you to retire. To be honest, usually it's a combination of the above, all of the above to some degree, not necessarily always selling off assets of the farm, but usually you see a combination of each of these, and each of them comes with their own sets of challenges. For example, if you're selling to a key employee, you really want to relay that message that you have an interest in possibly transitioning the farm to them, because the last thing you want is your retirement plan dependent on them being there and they leave and go somewhere else. So there's certain plans you can actually put in place to help retain employees, or even just communicating with your own family, and have a plan in place so they have a way to help pay you as well, but just make sure they're going to be there for when you eventually do want to retire.
Okay, it is 7, but we only have a few more slides, so bear with us. So selling or gifting, that's a big question in the plan. And I think, as you can see, the decision to sell or gift, or like Cody said, could be a combination of things depending on your assets, is based on your needs, point of view, that sort of thing. I have an example of one client with, many different parcels of land, and several parcels went into an irrevocable trust with the intention that those are going to go to the family and they're going to be protected from a Medicaid lien because they want to keep them in the family. But a few parcels were left out because that's their retirement money. They're planning to sell a few parcels and to retire off. So that was the plan that was right for them. And they're working on management with the kids and that sort of thing too. So these are some different considerations on the screen. I think also important to mention conservation easement, if that's something that you're interested in, can also affect your plans with selling or gifting land. So what do you do next? We put our contact information up here, or our websites where you can find our contact information. On my firm's site, we have a contact us page, and if anybody wants a 15-minute conversation with an attorney, we've got a link where you can schedule a call with us. Again, my partner, Jess Botello, is also very well versed in all of this. And so either one of us could help you with a conversation if you would like that. Cody, you want to speak to what you can
ours
offer?
is similar. I mean, like Megan said from the start, you don't have to work with us. Our firm would gladly work with anybody that needs help. But I think the main point of all this is just determining what you're looking to do, and then also not to be nervous to reach out to an advisor, an attorney, just to kind of even just start with questions, at least start somewhere. I mean, I think that's people's biggest fear, is just not knowing, and they're afraid to ask questions. So I would just encourage people to reach out to any advisor really, and just start there with the succession planning conversation.
Great. Okay. And then if you already have planning in place, it's always good to take it out and look at it and figure out if it's still good for you. A lot of the clients that we work with already have an estate plan in place, usually sometimes very old, or have something kind of roughed up, and things change and laws change. So it's good to revisit. And lastly, just to show you this slide again, to have you think about how all of these things intersect. So we've reached the end of our presentation. Thank you for hanging on with us. I'm sure, Cody, are you okay? If anybody has a question and is ready,
I'm good.
you can
If
stay
anyone
on
has
a few minutes.
questions.
Thank you guys so much for presenting. It's a very big topic, but it's one that has a great impact that will not just impact the generation that's here, but many down the road. And it affects our farmland and everything else. So thank you for this.